Save the Sentinels. Welcome to Universe Unique, where today, the truth finally comes to light. You blinked, and Spider-Man's suit completely changed. But this isn't just an upgrade for nostalgia's sake. There's something way deeper behind this reveal. And yeah, Sony let more slip in this teaser than they probably meant to. If you're one of us, the fans who catch the things no one else sees, hit subscribe. This channel's about to cross a milestone we couldn't have imagined 6 months ago. Every new sub is another ally in the fight against the noise flooding the multiverse. Now let's talk about what most people missed. Peter's new suit appears in full daylight. No shadows, no CGI distractions. And right away, the texture jumps out. This isn't some Stark Tech polished up armor. It's raw fabric, DIY stitching. Like he made it himself, quietly, alone, with nothing but a sewing machine and grit. That alone tells you where Peter's at in this new arc. Emotionally, narratively, spiritually. He's rebuilding from scratch. Off the grid, off the radar. A version of Spider-Man that feels Brooklyn-level grounded. Look closer. The chest emblem fuses elements of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's designs. The classic lines, the breathing symbol, the curves that move with the body. It's clearly referencing the final swingsuit from No Way Home, but with key differences. Subtle, intentional, and possibly game-changing. Then there are the eyes. Same tech DNA from Stark, sure, but looser, less refined. As if he's using salvaged parts. It feels improvised, like Peter's not just stepping into a new chapter. He's starting over entirely. And here's what barely anyone noticed. There's a tiny detail in the suit that may be the biggest visual clue yet that Peter is gearing up for something way bigger. A collision course with a new class of villains. I'll circle back to that. If this kind of deep-cut multiverse breakdown resonates with you, like the video, sub to the channel, join the inner circle. We see what others miss, and we're just getting started. In the middle of a bustling crowd, on Spider-Man Day, Peter is seen fighting on top of a tank. The sequence seems like just another generic action scene, until you take a closer look. It's not just any military tank. The number and symbol on the side indicate that it belongs to the Department of Damage Control, the same one that has been appearing in the background since Spider-Man, Homecoming, and has been increasingly armed since then. But there's something even more unsettling. The same vehicle that bears the official Damage Control logo also has overlapping marks, visual symbols that refer to the Inner Demons, the gang controlled by Martin Lee, Mr. Negative. In other words, there's a narrative overlap here. 2. Entities theoretically opposed, one being state-owned and the other criminal, competing for the same space. Or, perhaps, collaborating behind the scenes. Tense and dry track. This opens up a dark reading line. Either Mr. Negative's gang is infiltrating the damage control structure, or that structure is more compromised than the MCU wants to admit. This ambiguity is not new. In the Spider-Man PS4 games, Martin Lee already maintained a facade of benefactor while coordinating his demons in the shadows. The cinema is just reconfiguring this duality for the live-action universe. More than that, Peter himself seems to hesitate. It's not just a fight. In one of the frames, he tries to pull someone out of the tank, indicating that there may be civilians or prisoners being transported there. And this moral dilemma, to attack or to rescue, defines the kind of hero Peter is becoming. A hero increasingly lonely, outside the system and at war with it. But the biggest clue is not in the action, but in the silence of those who do not appear. Because if this tank has really been co-opted by the Inner Demons, and if Peter is facing multiple villains at the same time, then the urban war that is forming goes far beyond what this teaser revealed. And it may involve a new force behind it all. I'll explain who. Martin Lee has always been an ambiguous character. Philanthropic businessman by day, leader of one of the most violent gangs in the underworld of New York at night. In the comics, and in the Spid game. In Spider-Man PS4, he is the embodiment of moral duplicity. And now, everything indicates that he will bring this same duality to the live action. The presence of the inner demon symbols on the tank in the filmed scene suggests more than just a visual reference. This type of detail is placed with precision. If these vehicles belong to Damage Control and now display Lee's gang insignias, we have two likely scenarios. Either the gang has taken control of the equipment, indicating a violent power escalation, or Lee has direct connections to formal structures, which would be even more serious. Dry and muffled track. Behind the scenes of the production, rumors indicate that Mr. Negative will be treated as the true mastermind behind the villain's movements. And that changes everything. Unlike antagonists like Electro or Shocker, who act on impulse or revenge, Martin Lee is strategic. He infiltrates, manipulates, convinces. His most dangerous weapon is not the negative energy he releases with his hands. It is the facade of goodness that masks his silent domination. And there is one more clue. In the games, Lee has a direct relationship with the FEST shelter, which briefly appears in the MCU as a social project. If this connection is maintained, he may be presenting himself as a public savior while equipping criminals with diverted technology. In fact, the tank scene may be just the tip of the iceberg, the showcase of a deeper network of infiltration. An invisible war happening within the system itself. Theme. But the most curious thing is that the teaser does not show Martin Lee directly. He is still in the shadows. And when Marvel hides a character that already has symbols and trademarks on screen, it is because they are preparing a strategic entrance. The question now is, when he appears, will he come as a mentor, or as something even worse? And if he is already influencing other villains in the movie from now on, there is a name that emerges strongly in this context. A name that reignites an old theory of the fandom. Since Spider-Man Homecoming, Marvel has been suggesting, in small doses, the creation of a team of villains to face Peter Parker. With No Way Home, many believed that the Sinister Six would finally emerge, but the formation was still incomplete, and the members came from different universes. Now, what is emerging is something unprecedented. A formation entirely local, urban, built from villains that already exist within the MCU and Sony's universe. The first concrete indication comes from Michael Mando, the actor who plays the Scorpion. He posted directly from the set, excited, talking about stinging Spider-Man, which is enough to confirm that he will be in action in the movie. But he is not alone. Recent reports indicate that Tarantula, Ramrod, Boomerang, and even Tombstone will also appear. This is not a small thing. There are 5 villains with direct connections to the underworld and diverted technology, the same narrative pattern that unites almost all the antagonists. From Peter Present, visual effect with backstage print. And the most symbolic thing is the choice of these names. They are not cosmic or interdimensional villains. They are street figures, heavy, relentless. In other words, this lineup is consistent with a Spider-Man who has returned to basics, without Stark resources, without alliances with gods or wizards. Just him, his web shooters, and a hand-sewn suit. This increases the dramatic weight of the threat. Because unlike the grand villains of the past, these ones won't stop until they bring down what he represents. In the comics, different versions of the Sinister Six have always emerged with varying members, sometimes including Scorpion himself, or figures like Shocker and Rhino. The logic is not fidelity to the original formation, but the idea of a circumstantial alliance. And that's what seems to be happening now. The link between them? It could very well be Martin Lee, or someone more powerful who is using Lee as an intermediary. But there's a curious detail. No leak so far directly mentions Dr. Octopus, nor Norman Osborn. This indicates that the movie is building an alternative version of the Six, less fanciful, more brutal, and that in itself already marks an important break with the previous films. But there's a missing piece in this equation, a character who has not yet appeared, but whose name is inevitable when talking about organized villains in New York. And the answer may be in the subtext of the very backstage. They emerged as technical supporting actors, responsible for cleaning up the mess left by the Avengers' battles. But now, the Department of Damage Control is taking on a much more unsettling role. The tank present in the teaser scene, with official branding and overlapping marks of the Inner Demons gang, is not a continuity error. It is a clear sign that this organization is at the center of a new power network. Behind the scenes of the MCU, Damage Control has always operated in the shadows, ever since Tony Stark helped create the division with the government. But with the fall of the Stark Empire and the fragmentation of the heroes, Damage Control seems to have taken on a more militarized, almost paramilitary bias. In Ms. Marvel, we have already seen how invasive, armed, and quick to judge this entity can be towards anyone who steps out of line. Now, with this tank on urban soil and villains taking over the structure, the question is no longer who is in control, but rather, which side are they on? There is an even more serious possibility. What if Damage Control itself is providing technology, directly or indirectly, to the villains? Notice the resemblance between the equipment used by the antagonists and the devices confiscated by Damage Control in previous films, such as Spider-Man: Homecoming. There, they seized Chitauri weaponry. Now, the technology reappears adapted, redesigned, and in the wrong hands. In the comics, this kind of ethical collapse is text translated. It always signals an arc of internal corruption, and it never ends well. Whether it's SHIELD being taken over by Hydra, or the government using Sentinels to hunt mutants, the pattern is the same. The structure that should protect begins to persecute. And Marvel has already shown signs of returning to this narrative, with more urban, gray, and realistic tones. The symbolic use of this tank with dual identity, state and criminal, is the kind of visual detail that sets the stage for a larger revelation. And if Mr. Negative is just using the structure for his own purposes, the question is, who allowed it? Or worse, who else is involved? This line of tension between surveillance, oppression, and resistance may be exactly the missing link to introduce something that many fans have been waiting for. The connection to Marvel's street core, where names like Punisher, Daredevil, and Kingpin dominate the city's invisible gears. And there is a key character at the center of this gear. But so far, he has only been mentioned indirectly. He may be the true ghost of the new Spider-Man arc. And his absence speaks louder than any explicit presence. There is a thin line between what is revealed and what is deliberately omitted. And when Kevin Feige, in recent interviews, confirmed that Marvel was instructed by Sony to not touch Miles Morales in live action, what he did was not avoid the subject. It was signaling that something bigger is being built. The kind of silent construction. That's what the studio prefers to do when they want to build anticipation before the arrival of a new protagonist. Miles' absence so far is not neglect. It's a strategy. In Spider-Man: Homecoming, there was a deleted scene where Aaron Davis, the Prowler played by Donald Glover, mentions his nephew. The name is not mentioned, but comic book readers knew. It was Miles. Since then, the name has never been spoken out loud in the MCU, and the justification has now come, with Sony preparing the ground to introduce him officially after the conclusion of Beyond the Spider-Verse. But the question that arises now is, why are the new teaser and Peter's new suit so loaded with classic visual references, almost as if he is going back to his roots? The answer may lie right there. The MCU and Sony seem to be repositioning Peter for a more symbolic role, almost as an informal mentor, a more urban hero, without shiny armor or support from the Avengers. This directly refers to the brand new day phase of the comics, where Peter is starting over from scratch after losing everything. And it was exactly in this scenario that Miles gained space in the canon as the new Spider-Man in his own universe. If this transition is being designed, then this movie could be the bridge. The link between the classic Spider-Man and the next generation. A curious detail reinforces this idea. Peter's own suit in this teaser has looser lines, a more manual finish, almost as if it were deliberately less heroic and more accessible. A visual that leaves room for another Spider-Man to shine by his side, younger, more agile, and representing a different kind of legacy. But there is a risk embedded in this transition. Peter Parker's fandom is demanding. Marvel knows that. Therefore, any introduction of Miles must be done carefully, with emotional timing and narrative weight. If it comes as comic relief or a direct substitute, it will face resistance. But if it comes as an extension, as a legacy, then it works. And the urban scenario, the absence of major cosmic figures, and the return to the streets of New York all point to that. There is still no visual confirmation of Miles on set, nor explicit Easter eggs. But Feige's silence, the structure of this teaser, and the cycle that has been repeating since No Way Home, everything is setting the stage. The only question is, when does he enter the scene? And the answer may be, precisely in who is being left behind in this new chapter. And that leads us to two very familiar faces, but much more distant now. An absence speaks as much as a presence. And in the most recent teaser, there is no sign of MJ or Ned Leeds. This does not seem accidental. Since the end of No Way Home, with the memory break caused by Doctor Strange's spell, Peter Parker has literally been erased from the lives of the people he loved most. And now, what we see is a Peter operating alone, more isolated than ever, both emotionally and narratively. The P, Tom Holland himself, in recent interviews, commented that he would like to see the character facing the challenges of adult life, trying to balance heroism with anonymity. The new arc seems to reflect exactly that. A Peter without a home, without friends, without allies. Almost like a silent version of what Matt Murdock's Man Without Fear was. This reinforces the darker and more urban tone of the movie, and sets the stage for new connections, but also signals how emotionally adrift the character is. Still, there is a real chance that MJ and Ned will return, but in smaller roles, perhaps just as background presences, oblivious to the main drama. The question is, now they don't recognize Peter. And for that bond to return, the narrative would need to deal with an ethical dilemma. Should Peter try to win them back, even if it involves manipulating the truth again? Or should he move on and leave the past buried? In the comics, phases like One More Day and Brand New Day explore exactly this kind of conflict. The loss of ties in exchange for protection, and the pain that brings to the hero. The live-action adaptation seems to be heading in the same direction. And the choice to keep MJ and Ned on the sidelines of the trailer is not just to preserve surprises, it is a narrative decision that communicates. Now, Peter is at another point in the cycle. A point where familiar faces become distant memories. And the city, the only bond that remains. But there is still one detail that almost no one notices. A visual element that appeared discreetly in the initial teaser, but was changed in later versions. A small change in the costume that may indicate a new leap in Spider's journey, and perhaps a final sign that something much bigger is about to happen. Among the many details that circulated in the teaser versions, one in particular went unnoticed by most, but carries a symbolic weight that may reveal the narrative turn of the film. I speak of the subtle change in the spider pattern on the chest of the new costume. In some images, the symbol appears with clean and flattened lines, almost identical to the final swingsuit from No Way Home. In others, the lines are raised with visible relief, directly referring to Tobey Maguire's suit in Spider-Man 3. This variation is not just a matter of aesthetics. It may indicate something bigger, that we are not seeing one, but two different costumes. And if this is true, it could mean that Peter will visually evolve throughout the film, creating new versions of his own uniform in response to the challenges that arise, as has already happened in comic book arcs like Big Time and Ends of the Earth, where the suit reflects the hero's psychological moment. More than that, the version with more rustic lines and wrinkled fabric may represent Peter in a raw state, still trying to find himself. The suit with a more polished symbol, even if it does not appear in full, may be the harbinger of something greater. A final act with a revelation of a new definitive uniform. A uniform made to represent something beyond itself. And what if this is the suit that will be worn in a possible appearance by Miles, or in a crossover with the other spiders from the multiverse? Marvel and Sony know that Spider-Man's suit has always been more than just a costume. It is a symbol. When it changes, it's not just fabric. It's a sign that the legacy is about to be passed on, or that something inside Peter broke. And with the recent leaks, the actors reappearing on social media, and this teaser planting layers of visual interpretation, it's clear that this movie won't just be another spider adventure. It's a preparation for what comes next, a silent closure of a cycle, or the beginning of a new legacy. If you also felt this, if this reading is connecting you to something bigger, subscribe to the channel now. We are just a few steps away from reaching a goal that will change the size of our voice here. And each of your subscriptions makes a direct difference for this type of analysis to continue existing. The truth is in between the lines. And here, we read them all, until the next video.